Welcome, Fey and Miles and friends, to another episode of Reading with Grams. I hope you guys are having a fantastic day. Today's story is the Tuttle Twins and the Golden Rule. Ethan and Emily Tuttle weren't just twins, they were very good friends. Sitting together on the bus to their first summer camp, they whistled a camp tune their bus driver Donald had taught them. "We're here!" Emily shouted excitedly as the camp came into view. As the bus drove into the camp, the children could see all the exciting activities would be doing: swimming in the lake, archery, an obstacle course, and more. "Hey, it's Mrs. Miner!" Ethan shouted as the bus came to a stop, pointing to their favorite teacher from school. They were happy to see a familiar face. "It's the Tuttle Twins," she said with a smile. "I am so glad to see the two of you. Mr. Miner and I will be helping Chief Ron this summer as camp counselor." As the children unloaded their bags from the bus and were led by the counselor to four cabins, the eagle and turtle cabins were for the boys, and the bear and rattlesnake cabins were for the girls. "Looks like you'll be an eagle," Emily remarked to Ethan, seeing his blue handkerchief. "I get to be a rattlesnake," she added, making a loud hissing sound to tease her brother. "Much of your camp experience this week will be a series of competitions," Mr. Miner told all the children. "Your cabin mates are also your teammates. We hope everyone will try their best." Chief Ron will present the winner of each activity with a special ribbon to attach to their team flag, Mrs. Miner said, in recognition of their good performance and teamwork. "The Eagles are going to win, obviously," Ethan said. "We're a fearsome predator." "Yeah, you're going down," added Julian, another eagle, pointing to the other teams. "Better be careful," Emily calmly replied. You know that rattlesnakes sometimes bite if they're threatened." She smiled slyly. "That's right. Watch out, eagles," another warned another rattlesnake named Charlotte. The twins each went to their cabins and spent the rest of the afternoon getting to know their new teammates. Ethan and Emily liked the kids on their teams and had no trouble making friends with everyone. Summer camp was going to be awesome. One of Emily's new friends, Kate, was a bit worried about Julian. "He makes me nervous and sort of seems like a bully," she said. "We need to be careful in case he tries anything." Meanwhile, the Eagles were trying to figure out how they could win the camp competition. "If the rest of them are anything like my sister, I think the rattlesnakes might be tough to beat," Ethan said. "Don't worry about that," Julian quickly replied. "I got an idea." The first competition came the next morning after breakfast, a canoe race at the lake. When Mr. Miner shouted go, all the teams began paddling furiously towards the opposite shore. The rattlesnakes got off to an early start, but got tired quickly and slowed down. The Eagles edged past them and the other teams winning the race. As Chief Rat attached a ribbon to the Eagles' flag, he then helped Emily pull the rattlesnake canoe onto the sand, and discovered that a very large rock had been tied to the back, weighing them down during the race. Ethan shot a glance at Julian, who was giggling to himself. "Shh," he whispered to Ethan. Over the next couple of days, nothing seemed to go right for the rattlesnakes. Bent arrows, wet firewood, muddy ground, and more. Seeing the Eagles smirk and whisper each time they won made Emily suspicious that her team's bad luck was not an accident. The rattlesnakes were upset, feeling like they had been unfairly targeted. During one of their meals, the girls plotted their revenge to get back at the Eagles for what they had done. "We can't let them get away with this," said Kate. "We need to—" She was interrupted by the Eagles, who began loudly singing their team chant. "Soaring in the sky above, our mighty wings we show, hunting all the others who are our prey below." Ethan was getting into the team spirit and certainly liked to be a part of a winning team. "Oh, so we're prey now," Emily said in disgust. "It's time we teach these guys a lesson." That afternoon, the counselors led the children to a large obstacle course for their next activity. There were all sorts of challenges: tunnels, climbing walls, rope swings, and more. Emily clapped her hands in anticipation. "To win, your entire team must cross the finish line without falling," Mr. Miner told them. The children dashed onto the course as he shouted, "Go." As Charlotte hopped off the rope swing, she moved to the landing platform, making Julian fall into the mud, so he had to start over. Emily began to giggle, getting excited that they were in the lead. As she approached the balance beam, she decided to help her team as well. "Look out!" she shouted to Ethan, who was working his way along the beam next to her. He turned his head, lost his balance, and fell into the mud below. "Ugh, no foul!" he shouted in frustration. The rattlesnakes' revenge seemed to pay off. They won a ribbon for their team flag. Late that night, the rattlesnakes crept into the Eagle's cabin and set up all kinds of pranks that Kate had thought up. The boys were fast asleep and didn't notice a thing. "These boys are in for a big surprise," Emily thought to herself. "This will teach them for messing with the rattlesnakes." The Eagles awoke the next morning to discover they had been pranked. Toilet paper was thrown around and itchy wood chips were in their blankets. As Julian got out of bed, he startled the skunk that had been sleeping underneath. "Ah!" the kids shouted as the scared skunk let out a foul spray, running towards the door. The boys tried to wash up, but discovered someone had put dye in the water tank, which turned Emmett's skin blue. Suddenly, a scream came from the bathroom. Ethan ran out, startled by a snake. "This means war," Julian said, coughing from the stench. "We have to get even," he said, clenching his fist. The Eagles missed breakfast and were late for the morning meeting at the center of camp. The other team stood as far away as they could, plugging their nose. Apparently, the skunk smell hadn't washed off of Julian and his teammates as much as they thought. "Today's activity will be an orienting race," Mr. Miner announced to the children. Most didn't know what an orienteering was, so he explained that it involved using a compass to figure out what direction you should be traveling. "Each team will follow a different path lined with team markers," he said. "At these points, you will need to solve a math problem," Mrs. Miner explained. "Once solved, it will reveal what direction you must travel to find the next marker and a new clue. Keep solving the problems until you reach the end." Chief Ron rang a bell to signal the start of the race. The children huddled around their different team markers and opened their first clue. Ethan loved doing math. He helped his team quickly solve the problem. The Eagles used their compass to proceed in a straight line at 74 degrees west, putting them in first place right at the beginning. "Let's go!" Julian shouted to his teammates as they ran into the woods. "That ribbon is ours." The Eagles soon found other markers and solved those problems just as fast as the first. Ethan was proud that his math skills were beginning to be put to use. The clues pointed them down a path that led behind a waterfall. Inside a shallow cave was a small version of the camp's totem pole. This must be where all the team's paths will lead, Ethan guessed. Attached was the final clue, and Julian read it to the group. Though we all walk different paths in life, we still walk together as one, the note read. Solve the following problem to learn which direction you should all follow. The Eagles did the math, and Ethan led the group, with the compass pointing the way. Wait up, guys, Julian shouted from behind. What were you doing back there? Ethan asked him, curious why he had fallen behind. You might want to keep winning, right? Julian asked. I did what I had to do. Ethan could hear the other groups catching up behind them. The Eagles arrived in the meadow where the counselors were waiting on horses. When the Eagles realized they had won, they began to chanting, soaring in the skies above, we mighty wings we show, hunting all the others who are our prey below. Chief Ron added a green ribbon to their already impressive collection. So, how did we get so far ahead? Ethan wondered out loud. The others aren't behind us anymore. I changed the numbers on the final clue so the others would go in the wrong direction, Julian said quietly to his teammates with a devilish grin. That's not very nice, Emmett reluctantly protested. Ethan was helping us win without cheating. I think it's more fun to win when we do it the right way. The other teams should have gotten here by now, Mrs. Miner said, looking at her watch. Ethan saw how nervous she was becoming, which made him feel bad about what his team had done. He was worried about his sister and what might happen if all the other kids were really lost. Mrs. Miner, Ethan said, I think the other teams might need help. The numbers on the last clue were changed. They went in the wrong direction. Mrs. Miner told all the other adults, and they set off on horseback to bring the children back safely. It took a while, but the counselors found the other teams and helped the group get back to camp. Nobody was hurt, but they were very, very grumpy. Ethan was glad Emily was all right. Chief Ron emerged from his cabin. Gather around, everyone, after the sun sets, he said to the other counselors. It's time for a lesson. He was wearing a feathered headdress, traditional clothing, and looked very wise. That must be why he's called the chief, Emily said. That night, all the children took a seat near the fire, not knowing what to expect. The sound of drum filled the air as Mr. and Mrs. Miner, dressed as Native Americans, danced around the fire. These warriors represented the conflict of people throughout history, the chief announced. We are all part of the human family, brothers and sisters, and yet sometimes we live in fear of people who are different from different tribes and nations. We fight when we could be friends. The warriors began to pretend to fight with one another. Ethan and Emily liked the dancing, but were unsure why the counselors were doing this. Your teams are like tribes, and rather than being friends, you have fought, he said. Why? He asked the group. I don't like being picked on, Kate responded. We didn't want to lose, Julian added. I got jealous when the other teams were winning, Ethan said. Chief Rod nodded slowly. You have acted based on fear, he said. Fear can be a good thing because it drives us to act when real danger is upon us or when we need to defend ourselves. Mrs. Miner lifted a hatchet to pretend to attack Mr. Miner, who immediately defended himself with a shield. This made the kids giggle. But fear can also drive us to attack others, as you have all done. It is wrong to use force against another person or their property, the chief explained. It's okay to defend yourself if attacked, but you must never become the attacker. It is wrong to be the aggressor. But, Chief, the Eagles cheated first. It wasn't fair, so we had to make it even, Emily said. Justice is when balance is restored, when a wrong is made right, but revenge is not justice, Ron explained. Revenge is just adds another wrong. As he spoke, the golden ring behind him burst into flames and the drums grew louder. The two warriors began dancing again, pretending to fight back and forth. An act of revenge invites blowback. Another attack from those who were attacked, Chief Ron said. He looked at each team, and this cycle of revenge could continue back and forth forever. Have you seen this in yourself? Have you not? The children all nodded. Ethan realized that picking on the other team caused blowback. Emily had thought getting revenge would make the Eagles stop cheating, but it actually made them fight back even harder. You must stop this cycle of revenge and walk a better path in life, the chief continued. Calm the fear in your enemy. It is the only way to begin a new cycle of peace and prosperity. The drums and the warriors stopped as the chief Ron interpreted symbols from a parchment. Do not hurt your neighbor, for it is not him that you hurt, but rather yourself instead, he added. Do good to your neighbor, adding to his days of happiness as you add to your own. Emily leaned over Ethan to whisper in his ear, That's sort of like what mom and dad say. Treat others the way you want to be treated. This can be explained another way, my young friends. It is often known as the Golden Rule. The chief explained, My people believe in this rule, but it is not only ours, it is common wisdom in many cultures and religions. The Golden Rule: do not harm, do good. Mr. and Mrs. Miner jumped forward with their weapons. Do any of you enjoy being attacked? Mr. Miner asked. Wide-eyed and startled, the children all responded together, No. Then you, yourself, must choose to live by principle of non-aggression, never attack another person or their belongings, and only to use force to defend yourself, Chief Ron said. Only then can you live in lasting peace with others. The warriors dropped their weapons. Would you be would you prefer to be treated with kindness? Mrs. Miner asked the children. They all smiled and shouted together, Yes! Then you yourself must choose to treat others with kindness and respect, Chief Rod said. Only then can we enjoy prosperity in our lives. Smoke erupted as the chief threw something into the fire. When the smoke faded, the warriors had disappeared. Chief Ron concluded, Ending the cycle of revenge is the most difficult step. It requires each of you to let go of fear, forgive the other person, and bravely extend an arm of friendship. I'm sorry for causing problems, Emily, Ethan said. Me too, she replied. The twins hugged as kids from different teams shook hands and apologized. I challenge each of you to live the golden rule for the remainder of the week, Chief Ron said. The teams returned to their cabins, thinking about all the things that they had learned. It rained that night, but in the morning it was clear enough for a day hike. Each team carried their flag as they climbed up a nearby mountain. On a team, you have a common identity and can work together to accomplish more than you could alone, the chief explained as they began. Our differences are valuable. If everyone was the same, we couldn't help or learn from one another. When they reached the top Later that morning, the children ate lunch while enjoying the view. Being different from one another or being on different teams should not divide us, Mrs. Miner said. It should bring us closer together. She and Mr. Miner then gave a special friendship bracelet to each child to remind them of the lesson that they learned from the chief. Look, it's golden, Emily pointed out to the others, just like the golden rule. A flash of lightning appeared in the distance, followed by a loud clap of thunder. Kaboom! The group began their trek down the mountain, getting soaked in the heavy downpour of rain. The camp is flooding, Emily shouts as they approach the cabins. The storm had caused the nearby river to begin overflowing, and water was running into the campground. This week you have fought, Chief Runs said. Now you have an opportunity to collaborate, to work together on something important. We must divert the water to protect the camp. Each team took a different task and got to work. The bears and the turtles worked together filling sandbags. Shoveling over and over was hard work. The rattlesnakes and eagles formed a human chain to move each sandbag to the water's edge and stacked them to build a wall. The counselors helped here and there and made sure everybody was safe. They need some extra help, Miss Miner said, seeing the children struggle. She began walking towards them to lend a hand. No, Ron replied. What they need is experience of working together to solve a problem. Let's let them do the work and enjoy the benefit. When the children had finished, they were tired, hungry, and covered in mud, but they had achieved their goal. The group watched as pools of water came close to the camp, but they were stopped by the wall of sandbags. We did it, many of them exclaimed, giving high fives to one another. Wait until our parents hear about this, he remarked to some of his friends from other teams. That was hard work, but I actually had fun doing it, Charlotte replied. Do you see what happened? Chief Runs asked the children. They shook their heads, confused. Look at yourselves right now. You're not divided by teams. You're not fighting. This experience brought you together to work on something bigger than yourselves or your individual teams. Everyone gathered together in the dining lodge to dry off and to talk about their latest adventure. Mrs. Miner joined them with an armful of ingredients to make s'mores. We're very proud of each of you, she said. And now that you've applied the golden rule, how about we golden up some of these marshmallows, she said with a wink. As Emily ran to grab a marshmallow, she stopped short, remembering to treat others the way she would want to be treated. After you, she said to Julian, who was right behind her. Ethan watched from beside the fireplace and gave her a thumbs up. The final day of summer camps were much more enjoyable now than how it started. Ethan loved spending time at the archery range, and Emily learned how to make Native American jewelry. Even though the teams still competed against one another in some of the activities, they did so fairly and, more importantly, focused on doing their best, having fun, and treating everyone nicely. Chief Ron watched the children as they carried their bags to the bus on the last day of camp. Don't fear others. Be friends, he shouted. And don't forget the golden rule, he shouted, waving goodbye. We won't, the Tuttle Twins and their new friends shouted back, holding up their new golden bracelets as a constant reminder to always treat others the way that they want others to treat them. The end. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode of Reading with Grams. Fey, Miles Grams misses you, and I'm sending you a big hug and kiss, and can't wait to give you guys one in person. Till next time, bye.